So, as I said I would, I'm here bringing down my track Date. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a professional producer or a very good teacher, so take my advice lightly here. It's coming up on the 1 year anniversary of Date, so that's kind of why I wanted to do this. So, the concept behind Date is pretty self explanatory. I wanted to make kind of a bubbly, feel good track about pitching ideas for dates with my partner. After Frozen, which was more somber but had a heartfelt message, I wanted to go in a more lighthearted direction. I think this particular style is called kawaii future bass or bubblegum pop, a sort of cutesy, synth-centered poppy mishmash of sounds. If you listen to artists like Snail's House and Mo Shop, you know what I mean. I actually made a list of references for the track, from general references to chord references to drum references to mixing and mastering references. So here's a tip. If you're committing to a track, make a list of references. This list is anything that inspired the track you're making, and point out what in particular from the track you took direct inspiration from. Listen to one or two of these before each session of work to kind of stay sonically focused, and it can help any collaborators also get the gist of what you're trying to do. So for instance, a big inspiration for me was Maboroshi by Hyper Potions. So I noted what I wanted to reference, how the claps are mixed, the snare rolls, the pluggy synth, and the way the hi-hats are mixed. I struggled through the mixing of this on my 2012 MacBook Pro. I've got a more recent MacBook now that I got last year, but that was a struggle. It would freeze every millisecond from the sheer amount of CPU pressure. It would click and pop and scream whenever something went wrong. But I got through it. So you'll see most tracks here are bounced or frozen. No pun intended. These two functions basically do the same thing. Bouncing is something you do when you're done designing some sound, but freezing is something you do when you're kind of working on it and you want to suspend your progress to free up some CPU so you can work on some other things. I actually recorded and processed the vocals in another project file, so I recommend this, recording vocals in another project file to save on CPU. Now, let me actually get into breaking this down. So this is sort of the way I group things. Vocals at the top, in this case, violin for the intro is next. Then piano chops, where I lay out the chord progression of the song and other piano bits. Main leads, soft leads, arpeggios, and then a few layers of chords and pads. Bass, and then the ambience that you hear in the intro and the verses. Some transition effects, mainly sweeps and pans and such. One-time effects, one-hitters. And then down at the bottom are my percussion tracks. They got like a textural kit, main drum kit, percussion, which just has a bunch of sound clips and other bounce things, and then toms. So this chord pattern here was kind of the first idea that I got for the song in May 2021. It sort of became the transition motif. Here it is. And then I added some layers. So the chorus is what came to me afterwards, and the main lyric sort of sprouted from there. I like the collection of chords and pads that sort of build and descend. They sound a bit weird on their own. You can hear some filter opening, release automation, and some reverb automation there as well. Those chord stabs that coincide with the vocals here in Atmosphere was sort of in my vision from day one.
Leap into the atmosphere, there's no time to waste.
And I like this little off-key chord at the end. That's something you find that I like to do in my music, make the final chord and progression a little spicier. There are some spicy chords in the bridge as well. Let me go over to there. Yeah, I freaking love this vintage Vox pad here. It sounds really, really nice. You'll also hear that I low pass the vocals here.
On a warm summer's eve, we'll see where this takes us. The moment's contagious, no matter the place and no matter the means. I know you're the one that I feel reassured. So now you show.
So you hear how it kind of opens up to those higher frequencies. I just thought that it sounded cool. It kind of gave it a bit of a lo-fi feel. And then the vocals double as it gets more intimate. And you get this sort of art build-up that I really like.
Now you show me a spot nice and cozy to settle our minds and have some fun.
But let me go back to the first verse, actually. This one I struggled with producing because I didn't want any leads to take away from the sort of carefree vocals. I ended up with just a bit of piano here. And then as it gets to the second section, I ramp up the percussion and add some layers like guitar, a little voice pad, and these steel drums as well. Let me isolate the ambience here and the percussion because I think it sounds really nice. So I'm going back to the first section here for a moment. You can hear some cafe ambience and a little sipping transition. And I can hear waves in the background and seagulls. And I like the dry, kind of offbeat, sweepy percussion. I actually use a sample from Ramune by Snail's House in here. You might recognize that if you've listened to that song. And since we're looking at the ambience, I'll show you the verse 2 ambience as well. So you have similar percussion to the first verse, but with some bubbly sounds and cowbell apparently. And you can hear a theme park in the background as well. And now I can hear the cricket signaling the nighttime and some shakers to complement. And that's a Katamari Damacy sound effect there. I couldn't help myself. Speaking of sound effects, let me move back over to the chorus percussion. So in the beginning, the beat is pretty kinetic, and you hear that little snare roll and those little ticks to complement the lyrics. And then the breakdown here is very interesting. Some stitched together vocal chops and a woo, and then after that you hear this Pikachu sample that emphasizes the snare. Oh, and a nice vibra slap at the end there. So that tom thing is pretty simple actually. Let me show you. So I started with these synthesized toms going into these acoustic toms, all nice and bit crushed. And then I layered stuff on top until it sounded nice and chunky. So I'm not exactly sure what I layered in here. Probably some snares, probably some little noise hits. Yeah, sort of a, actually I think it's less of a snare and more of a like hitting the side of the drum. I guess you call that a rim. And that woo at the end, that little cymbal sort of top it off. There are a few other interesting percussion bits. Obviously, in the build up to the chorus, there's a sort of classic like clap build up that is very common in the sort of style that I was going for. And the second chorus has a bit of a pause in this percussion, which sort of increases the tension. And then back into that kinetic beat. And I really like that stereo delayed clap, which kind of leads us back into the kinetic beat. It's very nice. And then also these hi-hats here. I also really like this hi-hat filter sweep that goes on in this section. It's just sort of a little bit of ear candy there. But now that we're back on this chorus, let me break down some of the synths and leads that I designed for it. So I layered this glockenspiel with this space pan flute to create the main bulk of the lead. I actually used the space pan flute in another track of mine. Then it's layered with this kind of plucky square thing, and that sort of finishes off this sort of lead sound. Like on its own, it sounds sort of like thin and hollow, but when it gets the kind of lower frequencies of the space pan flute and the glockenspiel adds kind of more texture on top, it really sounds nice and juicy. Of course, I have these little trumpety chords here with little jittery accents that sort of add to the section. But then, of course, comes the little break in the song. I intended this to be like someone was like switching off a channel of the song for a second. I actually played this through speakers and re-recorded it so it can sound more authentic. Let me go back to the choruses because I used a lot of interesting chords and leads. I'll start with the pre-chorus though, that brassy chord which opens its release filter and kind of leads into the chorus. And then you have the main chord sort of stab pattern accented with this little jittery synth. And that's layered with some trumpet chords and stuff to flesh out the space a bit more. I also have these lolly bells which follow the melody, very much inspired by Memborishi by Hyper Potions.
Let's go on a date. Leap into the...
So those are just like very dry and sort of punchy. This is just a Serum preset that I bought and edited. Of course, you can't see a lot of those presets in action here because I bounced all of this. These are the stems. But I use Serum the most when making the instruments. I also use Logic's Alchemy, which is really good, and also Vital, which is a free synth, and Iris 2 by Isotope, which I think I only used like twice in here, but it's still an okay synthesizer. In the second verse, there are these really neat chord stabs. I guess I'll touch on the ARPs next. There aren't a lot of them, but the highlight for me is the ARP that follows the chorus here. Then there's this one, which sort of fills up the high frequency space of the chorus. And you notice a lot of reverb in those ARPs as well. If you notice that, like, when I'm soloing other tracks and you hear reverb from other tracks that are muted, that's because I use buses, which are basically shared effects chains. So you can add reverb or delay or compression, whatever you want to these. I use it mainly for reverb and delay because if I use only a few buses and send a lot of things to those buses, the reverb is much more consistent across the track. So I'll have, for example, like I'll have a big reverb or a small reverb or a plate reverb, but only one of each. So it's not, too many different reverbs, too many different sort of sonic zones or sonic rooms to keep it nice and consistent. What's this C4 Sparkle? I kind of forget what this is. Oh. Where does that play again? Hold on. Oh, after chorus section. That's pretty cool, actually. I like that. I forgot that I had that. Now, I didn't really touch on the bass because bass is not my strong suit, but really the highlight is the sort of crunchy bass that accompanies the sort of intro sections and those transition chords. This transition tab is full of junk, nothing too interesting. Just simple noise-based risers and fallers, some filtered, some modulated. Although there is one thing I love right here. which is right before the chorus. And that's just a preset for Vital that I found, and I edited it a little bit. So I saved the vocal production for last because I want to go a little bit more in depth and show some of my own shortcomings with the vocals. So when you're recording vocals, it's good to be consistent. So I used the same mic in the same location. So I recorded takes straight into the Logic file, as you can see. Logic has a great feature where it actually combines vocal takes into one comp. And as you can see here, you can take the best bits and kind of make the best overall composition from those bits. From there, I bounce the section, and then I use flex pitch to make macro pitch adjustments. I've had times where flex pitch breaks on me, so it's not perfect. Now I apply Nectar 3, which is this great all-in-one vocal plugin from iZotope. It's not necessary since many of its features are available as stock plugins, obviously EQs, de-essers, but this makes it convenient, especially with this voice assistant button, which applies a good base layer of processing. And then you can say which vibe you want, which intensity of processing you want. And then you play a bit of audio, and then from there it would apply those effects as you play the audio. So here for the verse vocals, I use a bit of pitch correction, a noise gate, this EQ to pronounce some of the higher frequencies, this de-esser to lower the sibilants, and then another EQ layer, and then this delay which I automate in at the end of the verses. I guess I put a little bit more compression on that, and then as well as that tube EQ. Then for the harmonies and doubling, I think I have a similar Nectar vocal chain, the only difference being this spreader, which makes these harmonies and doubling layers have a bit more space to them. Now for the chorus, it looks like I upped these higher frequencies a bit more than I did on the verses. And then I think I ordered my chain a little differently than I did on the verses. And then I also have this harmony module here. And then of course I have reverb on that as well. I wouldn't put reverb straight onto a single track today. I'd probably put it onto a send, a bus, and then from there I send different tracks to the same bus reverb. So on the bridge, I have 2 EQs, which isolate this kind of mid-band of frequencies, which gives that sort of retro quality that I was going for here. Then I automated a few of those EQ curves over time to open up those frequencies. And it looks like I also have a bit crusher in here to give it a bit more texture. And I think I automate that over time as well. Yeah, a bit crusher mix here. And it looks like I also have some plugin here. I guess I uninstalled it. So I don't think you'll hear it here when I play the example.
We'll hit the town on a warm summer's eve. We'll see where this takes us. The moment's contagious.
No matter the place and no matter the means, I know you're the one and I feel reassured. So now you have shown me a spotlight.
So you can see how the automation there relates to the actual sound you hear. Now for the final chorus.
Let's go on a date.
Now for the final chorus, I have a bit more distortion and bit crushing on there. And then also some more delay to give it more space. This layer above is the one that I bounced out into the main track. It's just the same final after chorus bounce. But I ran it through VocalSynth, which is a really great plugin. I can actually show you here quick. I'll just create a new audio track and put on VocalSynth. So yeah, you can see how you have all these different vocal effects you can add, and you can adjust the actual synthesizers here. And what, for example, this BioVox, what vowel sound it's making. And you can also control it via MIDI, which is very nice. So for instance, you can vocode to specific notes that you want. Polyvox basically transmits the raw signal through VocalSynth, but you can adjust the formant and character and stuff here, and also this level. And you can see this little diagram down here that kind of shows, that kind of visualizes the sounds. You can visualize how your different layers look, and you can have them all on at the same time. And there are also a bunch of different effects down here. You can add distortion, a filter, a chorus. I probably added some of those to this. I don't remember though, because I don't have the actual track anymore. I bounced it out. But you can really put anything through VocalSynth, which is very cool. So let me play the section again so you can hear that VocalSynth.
Let's go on a date. Oh.
So you can hear that kind of lower robotic tone to that, especially in this section here where you hear the breath. It's like a very robotic breath there. In the end, I don't think I mixed the vocals very well within the track itself. The doubling and harmonies were meh, and I didn't carve out a great space for the vocals. And don't tell her I said this, but Lacey, she isn't a great vocalist. But we tried our best, and this is a song for us, so it fit. Even if she's not the best singer, it's all right. Now I'll go back to the main file. So now I'll go into mixing and mastering a little bit. I won't go into it too much because I'm pretty piss poor at mixing and mastering, but I'm improving. I kept the percussion pretty quick and snappy with a pretty minimal amount of reverb and delay, and if I used reverb and delay, it was in very specific places for effect. Now, I don't remember if I went over this last bit yet, but I suppose I can. I do really like this percussion in the last section. And I especially like that crash with the delay on it. And up here I have this kind of signature modulated sound in conjunction with these wubby trumpets here. It's a very strange sound, but I kind of think it adds something. It's a very like chaotic but fun sort of sound. And then I think that the bass here is actually kind of neat. At the end there, it doesn't even sound like a bass anymore. It just sounds like some sort of retro video game noise. And then I don't think that I mentioned the distorted electric guitar in the final chorus as well. This is pretty neat. I mean, I'm not good at making amped guitar sounds, but it's, you know, it's something. But yeah, back to the kind of mixing and mastering in general. I tried to balance the kind of various frequency spaces and utilize the stereo space to kind of pan left and right and spread in places. In some places, it's still muddy, but I'm getting better. And to master this on the stereo out channel, I use Ozone 9 Elements. If you see this plugin on sale from iZotope, get it. It is a pretty good kind of simplified mastering engine. And this mid-side EQ here is my savior. You can isolate each channel here, the mid or side, and mix to each of those specific frequency bands. And I usually put kind of the higher frequencies, as you can see, on the side channel. And then on the mid, I put some of the lower frequencies. I up some of those. And then it's also good to have this mono button here. So as you're mixing and mastering, you can see if it sounds good in mono, see if it sounds good in stereo, or swap the stereo channels as well. Now, I haven't tested this when trying to use things like Dolby Atmos or like 5.1 channel sound. There's probably better mastering engines for that specifically. So this is probably best for stereo. And like a lot of the other iZotope plugins, it also has a master assistant button, which kind of automates and finds a good bass level mastering for your track. Whenever you're mastering a track, you always want to play your track on different speakers. So for example, through headphones or through like laptop speakers or through a phone speaker or through some mono speaker, you want to cover your bases and make sure it sounds good on many different devices. And also whenever you're mastering, put some distance between you and the song. So don't do mastering as soon as you finish mixing a song. Come in with kind of clean ears, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my breakdown of Date. I hope you enjoyed this. I promised someone I'd do this, so I hope you learned something. Again, I'm not the best producer, obviously. I only started producing like 3 years ago, and maybe a little longer than that, because I started in GarageBand and moved to Logic. So yeah, I hope you learned something. See you in 10 years when I release a song.